What's going on YouTube? My name is Branye Tomas, and today I will be reading Stephen King's Everything's Eventual until I feel like I'll read like 15 minutes like I'm a cenat, and then yeah. So the current chapter I'm on is all that you love will be carried away. So let's read this and let's get this video started. Okay. All that you love will be carried away. It was a Motel 6 on I-80 just west of Lincoln, Nebraska. The snow that began at mid-afternoon had faded the signs virulent yellow to a kinder pastel shade as the light ran out of the January dusk. The wind was closing in on that quality of empty amplification one encounters only in a country's flat midsection, usually in wintertime. That meant nothing but discomfort now, but if big snow came tonight, the weather forecasters couldn't seem to make up their minds. Then the interstate would be shut down by morning. That was nothing to Alfie Zimmer. He got his key from a man in a red vest and drove down to the end of a long cinder block building. He had been selling in the Midwest for 20 years and had formulated 4 basic rules about securing his night's rest. First, always reserve ahead. Second, reserve at a franchise motel if possible. Your Holiday Inn, your Ramada Inn, your Comfort Inn, your Motel 6. Third, always ask for a room on the inn. That way, the worst you could have was one set of noisy neighbors. Last, ask for a room that begins with a 1. Alfie was 44, too old to be fucking truck stop whores, eating chicken fried steak, or hauling his luggage upstairs. These days, the room on the first floor usually reserved for non-smokers. Alfie rented them and smoked anyway. Someone had taken the space in front of room 190. All the spaces along the building were taken. Alfie wasn't surprised. You could make a reservation, guarantee it, but if you arrived late on a day like this was after 4 p.m., you had to park and walk. The cars belonging to the early birds were nestled up to the gray cinder block in the bright yellow doors in a long line, their windows already covered with a scrim of light snow. Alfie drove around the corner and parked with the nose of his Chevrolet pointed at the white expanse of some farmer's field, swimming deep into the gray of Days Inn. At the farthest limit of vision, he could see the spark lights of a farm. And there, they would be hunkered down. Out here, the wind blew hard enough to rock the car. Snow skidded past, obliterating the farm lights for a few moments. Alfie was a big man with a florid face and a smoker's noisy respiration. He was wearing a top coat because when you were selling, that was what people like to see. Not a jacket. Storekeepers sold to people wearing jackets and John Deere caps. They didn't buy it from them. The room key lay on the seat beside him. It was attached to a diamond of green plastic. The key was a real key, not a mag card. On the radio, Clint Black was singing "Nothing But the Tail Lights." It was a country song. Lincoln had an FM rocket now, but rock and roll music didn't seem right to Alfie. Not out here, where if you switch over to AM, you can still hear angry old men calling down hellfire. He shut off the engine, put the key to 190 in his pocket, and checked to make sure he still had his notebook in there too. His old pal, "Save Russian Jews," he said, reminding himself, "collect valuable prizes." He got out the car, and a gust of wind hit him hard, rocking him back on his heels, flapping his pants around his legs, making him laugh a smoker's surprised rattlebox laugh. His samples were in the truck, but he wouldn't need them tonight. No, not tonight. Not at all. He took a suitcase and his briefcase out the back seat, shut the door, then pushed the black button on his key fob. That one locked all the doors. The red one set off an alarm, what you were supposed to use if you're going to get mugged. Alfie had never been mugged. He guessed that few salesmen of gourmet foods were, especially in this part of the country. There was a market for gourmet foods in Nebraska, Iowa, Oklahoma, and Kansas, even in the Dakotas, although many might not believe it. Alfie had done quite well, especially over the last 2 years as he got to know the market's steeper creases, but it was never going to equal the market for, let's say, fertilizer, which he could spell now, even now in the winter wind that was freezing on his cheeks and turning them an even darker shade of red. He stood where he was a moment longer, waiting for the wind to drop. It did, and he could see the spark lights again. The farmhouse, and it was possible that behind those lights, some farmer's wife was even now, heating up a pot of cottager split pea soup, or perhaps microwaving a cottager shepherd's pie, or a chicken Francis. It was possible as hell. While her husband watched the early news with shoes off and his socked feet on a hasket, and overhead their son played a video game on his GameCube, and their daughter sat in a tub, chin deep in the fragrant bubbles, her hair tied up with a ribbon reading The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman, or perhaps one of the Harry Potter books, which were favorite of Alfie's daughters, Carleen. All that going on behind the spark lights, some family's universal joint turning smoothly in a socket, but between them and the edge of this parking lot was a mile and a half of flat field, white in the running away live low sky, comatose with the season. Alfie briefly imagined himself walking into that field in city shoes, his briefcase in one hand and his suitcase in the other, working his way across the frozen furrows. Finally arriving, knocking, the door would be open and he would smell pea soup, that good hearty smell, and hear the KTV meteorologist in the other room saying, "But now look at this low pressure system just coming over the Rockies." But what would Alfie say to the farmer's wife? That he had just dropped by for dinner? Would he advise her to save Russian Jews, collect valuable prizes? Would he begin by saying, "Ma'am, according to at least one source I've read recently, all that you love will be carried away"? That would be a good conversation opener, sure to interest the farmer's wife in a wayfaring stranger who had just walked across her husband's east field and knocked on her door. And would she invite him in to step in to tell her more? He could open his briefcase and give her a couple of his sample books. Tell her that once she discovered the Cottager brand of quick-serve gourmet delicacies, she would almost certainly want to move on to the more sophisticated pleasures of Mamir. And by the way, did she have a taste for caviar? Many did, even in Nebraska. Freezing, standing here and freezing. He turned from the field and sparklights at the far end of it and walked to the motel, moving in careful duck steps so he wouldn't go ass over a tea kettle. He had done it before, God knew. Oops-a-daisy in 100 motel parking lots. He had done most of it before, actually, and suppose that was the least part of the problem. There was an overhang, so he was able to get out of the snow. There was a Coke machine with a sign saying, "Use the correct change." There was an ice machine and a snacks machine with candy bars and various kinds of potato chips behind curls of metal like bed springs. There was no "Use correct change" sign on the snacks machine. From the room to the left of the one where he intended to kill himself, Alfie could hear the early news, but it would sound better in that farmhouse over yonder. He was sure of that. The wind boomed, snow swirled around his city shoes, and then Alfie led himself to his room. The light switch was to the left. He turned it on and shut the door. He knew the room. It was the room of his dreams. It was square. The walls were white. On one was a picture of a small boy in a straw hat, asleep with a fishing pole in his hand. There was a green rug on the floor, a 1/4 inch of some rubby synthetic stuff. It was cold in here right now, but when he pushed the high heat button on the control panel of the climatron beneath the window, the place would warm up fast. Would probably become hot. A counter ran the length of one wall. There was a TV on it. On top of the TV was a piece of cardboard with One Touch movies printed on it. There were twin double beds, each covered with bright gold spreads that had been tucked under the pillows and then pulled over them, so the pillows looked like the corpse of infants. There was a table between the beds with a Gideon Bible, a TV channel guide, and a flesh-colored phone on it. Beyond the second bed was a door to the bathroom. When you turned on the light in there, the fan would go on too. If you wanted the light, you got the fan too. There was no way around it. The light itself would be fluorescent, with the ghosts of dead flies inside. On the counter besides the sink, there would be a hot plate and a Proctor Silex electric kettle and a little packets of instant coffee. There was a smell in here, the mingling of some harsh cleaning fluid and mildew on the shower curtain. Alfie knew it all. He had dreamed it right down to the green rug, but that was no accomplishment. It was an easy dream. He thought about turning on the heater, but that would rattle too, and besides, what's the point? Alfie unbuttoned his topcoat and put his suitcase on the floor at the foot of the bed closet to the bathroom. He put his briefcase on the gold coverlet. He sat down, the sides of his coat spreading out like the skirt of a dress. He opened his briefcase, thumbed through the various brochures, catalogs, and order forms. Finally, he found the gun. It was a Smith & Wesson revolver, .38 caliber. He put it on the pillows at the head of the bed. He lit a cigarette, reached for the telephone, then remembered his notebook. He reached into his right coat pocket and pulled it out. It was an old spiral, bought for $1.49 in the stationery department of some forgotten 5 and dime in Omaha or Silk City or maybe Jollibee, Kansas. The cover was creased and almost completely innocent of any printing it might once have borne. Some of the pages had pulled partially free of the metal coil that served as the notebook's binding, but all of them were still there. Alfie had been carrying his notebook for almost 7 years, ever since his days selling Universal Product Code readers for Simonex. Okay, 1 second. Okay. There was an ashtray on a shelf under the phone. Out here, some of the motel rooms still came with ashtrays, even on the first floor. Alfie fished for it, put his cigarette on the groove, and opened his notebook. He flipped through pages written with 100 different pens and a few pencils, pausing to read a couple of entries. One read, "I sucked Jim Morrison's cock with my pouty boy mouth. Lawrence, Kansas." Restrooms were filled with homosexual graffiti, most of it tiresome and repetitive, but potty boy mouth was pretty good. Another was, "Albert Gore's my favorite whore. Murdo's, Dakota." The last page, 3/4 of the way through the book, had just 2 entries. "Don't chew the Trojan gum, it tastes just like rubber. Avoca, Iowa. And Poopy Doopy, you so loopy, but pill in Nebraska." Alfie was crazy about that one. something about the EE, and then boom, you got Y. It could have been no more than a literate's mistake. He was sure that would have been Moore's take on it. But why think like that? What fun was that? No, Alfred preferred, even now, to believe that EE, wait for it, Y, was an intended construction. Something sneaky but playful, with the feel of an E.E. Cummings poem. He rummaged through the stuff in his inside coat pocket, feeling papers, an old toll ticket, a bottle of pills, stuff that he quit taking, and at last finding the pen that had always hid in the litter. Time to record today's finds. 2 good ones, both from the same rest area. One over the urinal he had used, the other written by a Sharpie on a map case beside us to have a bite machine. Snacks, which is Alfie's opinion, invented a superior product line, have for some reason been disfranchised in the 180 rest areas about 4 years ago. These days, Alfie sometimes went 2 weeks and 3,000 miles without seeing anything new, or even a viable variation of something old. Now, 2 on one day, 2 on the last day, like some sort of omen. His pen at Cottager Foods, the good stuff, written in gold along the barrel. Video cut out, so let's continue. Next to the logo, a thatched hut with smoke coming out the quaintly crooked chimney. Sitting there on the bed, still in his top coat, Alfie bent studiously over his old notebook so that his shadow fell on the page. Below Don't Chew the Trojan Gum and Poopy Doopy You So Loopy, Alfie added Save Russian Jews, Collect Valuable Prizes, Walton, Nebraska, and All That You Love Will Be Carried Away, Walton, Nebraska. He hesitated. He rarely added notes, liking his finds to stand alone. Explanation rendered the exotic mundane or so. Alright, let's continue. Explanation rendered the exotic mundane or so he had come to believe. In the early years he had annotated much more freely. But from time to time, a footnote still seemed to be more illuminating than demystifying. He started a second entry, All That You Love Will Be Carried Away, Walton, Nebraska, and drew a line 2 inches above the bottom of the page and wrote, asterisk. He put the pen back in his pocket, wondering why he or anyone contained anything this close to ending everything. He couldn't think of a single answer, but of course you went on breathing too. You couldn't stop it without rough surgery. The wind gusted outside. Alfie looked briefly toward the window, where the curtain, also green but a different shade from the rug, had been drawn. If he pulled it back, he would be able to see the chains of light on Interstate 80, each bright bead marking sediment beams running on the rod of the highway. Then he looked back down his book. He meant to do it, all right. This was just, well, breathing, he said and smiled. He picked a cigarette out the ashtray, smoked, returned to the groove, and flipped back through the book again. The entries recalled thousands of truck stops and roadside chicken shacks and highway rest areas the way certain songs on the radio can bring back specific memories of a place, a time, the person you were with, what you were drinking, what you were thinking. Here I sit, broken-hearted, tried to shit but only farted. Everyone knew that one. But here was an interesting variation from Double D Steaks to Hooker, Oklahoma. Here I sit, I'm at a loss, trying to shit out taco sauce. I know I'm going to drop a load, only hope I don't explode. And from Casey, Iowa, where State Road 25 crossed 180, my mother made me a whore, to which someone had added in a very different penmanship, if I supplied a yarn, will she make me one? He had started collecting when he was selling the UPCs, noting various bits of graffiti in a spiral notebook without at first knowing why he was doing it. They were just amusing or disconcerting, or both at the same time. Yet, little by little, he had become fascinated with these messages from the interstate, where the only other communication seemed to be dipped headlights when you passed in the rain, or maybe somebody in a bad mood flipping you the bird when you went by in the passing lane pulling a rooster tail of snow behind you. He came gradually to see, or perhaps only to hope, that something was going on here. The E.E. Cummings, lit of Poopy Doopy You So Loopy for instance, or the inarticulate rage of 1380 West Avenue, kill my mother, take her jewels. Or take this oldie, here I sit, cheeks a-flexing, giving birth to another Texan. The meter when you considered it was odd. Not Eames was some odd triplet formula with a stress on the third. Here I sit, cheeks a-flexing, giving birth to another Texan. Okay, it's broke down a little at the end, but that somehow added to its memorability. Gave it that final mnemonic twist of the tale. He had thought of on many occasions that he could go back to school, take some courses, get all that feet and meter stuff down pat. Okay, that's where I'm gonna stop because YouTube kind of takes longer for 15-minute, like above 10-minute videos. So we'll continue from page 79 tomorrow. See you guys then. Goodbye.